Okay, good morning, everybody. This week, Paddle Shanties number 3, we have 2 guests I'm pleased to welcome onto the show. The first is a founding father of modern dragon boating. In fact, that'll be an accurate description. So Mike Haslam, he was a key instigator, or the founding father, as I say, in British dragon boating, the British Dragon Boat Association, way back when. Also, 30 years ago, was instrumental in setting up the European Dragon Boat Federation. And also in 2021, we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the International Dragon Boat Federation, and Mike was involved very heavily, centrally, in the setting up of that organisation as well, albeit some 30 years ago in Hong Kong. Okay, so some anniversaries taking place this year and next. So there we have a founding father of the organisation, still very much involved, still very much engaged in the process, how the sport develops, move forwards. He's involved with the Dragon Sport News publication. And we also have Tim Smith, my namesake, Tim Smith the younger, a shade younger than me. He's on the BDA executive, the executive committee, just been re-elected onto that. And in many ways, he is and his viewpoints are, in my view, the future of the sport. So it's great to have not quite 2 opposite poles, but two different people from different aspects of the spectrum. Also, I'm hoping to include a discussion on the future of dragon boating. We're not here to set policy. We're just here to maybe open up lines of communication, establish a forum in how we can possibly think about taking those first tentative steps back onto the water. There are some huge challenges, which we recognise, but once you start pecking away at it, I use in coaching, I use the bunch of sticks analogy. You've had a massive bunch of sticks, try to break it over your knee, you probably wouldn't achieve it. If you broke the bundle down into each component and broke it stick by stick, then over a longer period you achieve the objective. So I'm really keen to start the process, start the ball rolling, start the decision. And I suppose in the words of Wayne Gretzky, if you're not familiar with Wayne Gretzky is widely considered to be the greatest ice hockey player of all time, a Canadian. And one of his quotes that I love, and I love my quotes, is a good player plays where the puck is. A great player plays where the puck will be. So we're not looking to set policy here or give a direction to anything. We're just asking to our friends to come together, have a discussion, see what they think, share some ideas, others to come in with their particular problems, and together hopefully we can make some positive steps towards moving the whole discussion forward and solving some of those problems. So I hope you enjoy the interviews and the discussions this week. Okay, good morning, everybody. This is going to be Paddle Shanties number 3, and I'm very, very pleased to actually introduce my namesake, Tim Smith Jr. I'm Tim Smith Jr. I'm Tim Smith the younger. I'm Tim Smith. Tim Smith is a member of Thames Dragon Boat Club down at London Regatta Centre, and has also been re-elected back onto the BDA Executive Council. So welcome to you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim Smith.
And to start with, just right off the bat, could you just give us a little bit of introduction on the person who is Tim Smith? Just tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, yep, I'm Tim Smith, your namesake. I've been paddling now for about, I think, just over 5 years. I think it was 2015. I joined Thames Dragon Boat Club. I actually joined because it was a sort of an LGBT plus, so I'm gay, and I joined. There was an LGBT plus open day, and I joined with a group of us. It's a team called, sort of like a sub team called Flaming Dragons. We had a few paddling sessions, and we then integrated into the main Thames team because actually, and this is what I found in the sport as a whole, but Thames was incredibly welcoming, incredibly diverse anyway, and it didn't matter who or what you were. So at the time, there was not really any need to have a subsection for LGBT paddlers because, you know, it felt natural just to be in the boat with everyone else, and it didn't really matter.
Yeah.
I've paddled for 5 years. I mean, I'm sure if you saw me paddle, I wouldn't say I'm a massively impressive paddler. I also have started helming, although I haven't taken my BDA helm courses yet. So
Great man, yes, okay.
don't
Sure.
don't criticise me too much on that. I should do, being a BDA member of the exec. I joined the BDA exec just over 2 years ago, and as you said, I've just rejoined it. Re-elected onto the committee. So I've been doing it for about 2 and a bit years, and I've paddled in Venice a couple of times, the Great River Race, done all the regattas, the nationals. I've been over into the Czech Republic, Český Krumlov, and was, I think, this weekend supposed to be in Barcelona in the Olympic dock regatta centre there. Yep, which unfortunately, because of the current situation, I'm not there, which is a bit sad. So yeah, I'm on the committee of Thames. I have been now for 3 years, and I'm boat manager, despite going into being the boat manager having particularly poor DIY skills. But managed to muddle through, and with the help of everyone else at the club, we've managed to keep the boats water resistant and keep the buoyancy aids refreshed and safe, and keep the paddling, the area where the container, which is basically is a container, clean and reasonably tidy. So there we go.
Okay, I mean, something I spoke about with Mike Haslam yesterday. I just went through he wrote a document for his Dragon Sport News in relation to, it was basically not provocatively titled, but it was interestingly titled. It was basically, who are the IDBF Council? And I read that and thought, okay, here we go. And actually it was a walkthrough of what it was. But at the end, he asked some interesting questions about the relevance of the IDBF Council in terms of, there's a big five, which is basically the English-speaking big countries: UK, America, China, UK, America, Australia, Canada, and China. So it's like not a Security Council sort of setup, but that sort of thing. And of course, the idea is got 74 members. Anyway, blah blah blah. And he mentioned about the balance of women. Okay, now I'm an ex-police officer, so I've gone through all of the stuff when I was serving of the institutionally racist and the gender balance and this sort of stuff, and it's all absolutely relevant, and I'm 100% behind it. And the question I asked was, in the vast majority of instances, you would have a lady representing ladies' interests, but you don't have to. You don't have to. It's basically, you're judging somebody, and I think we agreed that the most important thing was somebody who was able to recognise and understand issues as they pertain to any particular subgroup, be that ladies or paradragons or LGBT or whatever. So that was that. And in most instances, the person who would be interested in a particular subgroup of people would be somebody from that group, but doesn't have to be. That's all. So what I'm really interested in, you mentioned that right off the bat, really yourself, is there a discrepancy from the LGBT viewpoint, if that is the correct terminology, in terms of dragon boating? I've not noticed that myself. Is there?
Well, I mean, firstly, I agree with you that diversity is important, and actually it really does help to have someone who goes through, who is like, so if you're, to really properly understand women's racing, women's sports, the issues within sport, that it definitely helps to be a woman, or at least have women feeding into the whole process. Equally with LGBT, I mean, transgender issues are potentially a hot topic, especially with the IOC, but also in dragon boat racing. It helps if there is a trans person there, but it also helps to have someone who's open-minded, can take the views of hopefully the trans community. The same with any other minority or any other kind of class of diversity, as you know, for want of a better phrase. So actually, I mean, if you look at the makeup of the BDA committee, we have women, we have men, majority men, I think is the current case. I think we've got 4 women on the committee. But if you're starting to look into other races, we're all effectively white British, I think, from what I can see. So I mean, if you're looking in from other communities in the UK into dragon boating, and you see the makeup of the BDA committee, does that give you confidence to get into the sport? Does that give you confidence that your view is expressed? Does that give you confidence that your sport is listening to you? You could even say, go onto the BDA website. Where does it say, you care about all different types of people? At the moment, there isn't much, unless you go to the vision document that says we're looking to promote competitive sport for all. And that means for everyone, men, women, young, old, black, white, Asian, etc. We're a Chinese Asian traditional sport. Absolutely. And yet there isn't any Chinese Asian people on the BDA committee. So what does that, take it from what you will, what that means. I mean, for me personally, when I look at the sport, I don't feel there's a massive issue. But then I'm coming from it. I certainly don't think there's an issue in LGBT, but I think we need to state it and make it clear and obvious that there isn't an issue. And if there is, then people should be able to come to someone and say there is and tell us what the issues are. And at this moment in time, I don't feel that is there. And that is something I would like to see improve.
In a nutshell, that is exactly why I thought it was really important for you to come on this particular program, and not just here, but provide a platform for that, because this is really refreshing new thinking, because you've actually come to the point I was going to come to. As far as I'm concerned, if there's a community that needs representation, they should be represented, as simple as that. But I was thinking more in terms of the not so much the diversity in terms of nationality, ethnicity, because I mean, like I say, at the moment, apart from having the 2,000-year-old roots in Chinese history and all that sort of stuff, which is important, but there are, if you just look at the IDBF alone, 74 different nations represented, and we have the same situation. And this was this article in Dragon Sport News at Micro in relation to, when I say Security Council, what happens with the IDBF is that the Big Five, so the English-speaking white Anglo-Saxon countries plus China, they decide what the questions the 74 are going to vote on. So, for example, they would say, we're going to ask you to vote on question A and question B. And then the 74 get a chance to vote on question A and question B. If you're from Mauritius, and I say that because a friend of mine has opened up the Mauritius Paddling Academy.
That sounds nice.
They might say, well, actually, I want to ask question C. But they don't get the chance to do that, because they can only vote on the Big Five, what they've posed. Of course, the point we mentioned yesterday was with Zoom or there are other platforms available, I have to say, but this sort of platform, then even if somebody didn't go to the World Championship last year and therefore didn't go to the Congress afterwards, they could join them on Zoom. And why shouldn't somebody in I don't know if anybody's paddling dragon boats in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but say DRC had a team, or South Africa, or whoever's going to be, Israel, they can join, and why can't they have an equal say? Of course, when you start talking about that, then I'm sure you in your work, if you had a survey or did a BDA survey or something, you sent it out to everyone, maybe 70% won't even respond. But the important thing is they've got the chance to respond if they want to. If they don't respond, they've got something better to do or other to do, great. But it's the access and the opportunity. And that's really, when I talk about diversity now, having come through, like every other police officer of my generation, the whole situation where we thought we were not racist and we were in a racist organisation, because that's got to be realistic about it, and we've come through that or turned itself upside down, and it's interesting to see how your perspective changes. But if people need representation, they get representation in democracy, don't they? And you're absolutely right.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. But it's the organisation does reflect, or should reflect, the community. And if you look at the however many it is, 1,200 members of the BDA or any sports organisation, it's a fairly broad spectrum of people. And the problem is, and we touched upon this, and it's not a criticism of the BDA, it's an observation that actually Mike Haslam, the founding father of the organisation, has made as well. So it's relevant and it's current. And it's not throwing stones at all to say, well, is the organisation still as relevant, or is it as relevant as it should be? Because we have the situation in a lot of governing bodies, and this is not BDA specific or IDBF or anybody, where you have a collection of people who some years ago did a fantastic job and set up a club, a organisation, a governing body. And it's going to be people who are interested in the sport, because people say governing bodies are self-serving. Well, of course they are. That's what they do. Who else would want to run the BDA apart from dragon boaters? So you have that situation. And they always have, unless it stays current and gets new people like yourself in, it runs the risk of these people who are the founding fathers end up possibly choking the thing to death because they become the guardians. And I'm not suggesting this is the case, but that's why you need, in my view, young people. Give us your thoughts on that, because that's quite important.
I would agree with you. I think all organisations have the issue of people who are very committed. They volunteer a lot of time and energy into something, and over the years they have a way of doing things, and that way is the way it is done.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can result in no change occurring, no innovation, no different ideas and things like that. And it can create a closed shop. I mean, before I joined the BDA exec, my view is it was a closed shop. And to be honest with you, my first year on the exec, I'm probably going to get into trouble for this, but I felt it was a closed shop. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I didn't know how I could get involved in things. I didn't really know what I should be doing on the exec. It took a while to, you talked there about the IDBF council, but I'm not even there yet in knowing how the IDBF and the EDBF works. I'm still just learning how the BDA works. I think to go back to your point, I think my view of the BDA is it is relevant. A couple of years ago, and this is not just me, this is others on the exec, we took a step back and had a look, what does the BDA do? And we came up, we effectively asked the exec, we then asked the clubs at the club congress, and we asked paddlers at nationals, what is it the BDA does? What is it we should be doing? And I remember the first committee meeting we had where we asked this with all the other exec members. And at the time, we couldn't all agree whether the BDA was there just to run races, or whether it should have a wider role of, supporting clubs or growing the sport, or, doing all that kind of stuff. So, we have created a vision strategy available on the website. You can see under the BDA if you want to have a little look. And it's not like earth shattering, but it's important to state it. And it's important that you can then, every exec meeting now, and this is to Neil Pickles, the chair's credit. We have monthly Zoom meetings, and we did even before the lockdown for 2 years, where decisions, I've seen an improvement in decision making. To start off, it was all around nitty-gritty detail and lots of people talking, and now we're actually moving forward. We're making decisions. We're referencing the strategy and looking at, where do we want the sport in 5 years' time, and moving things forward. And we might not get there, but that, for me, that's the starting building blocks. The other area that I want to mention really is, you go back, you've got people have been on the exec for a long time, and that is good because they give their knowledge, they give their experience, they give, their history into the sport. But the problem I see, and the problem we have moved towards, is that they were doing a lot of stuff, but a lot of stuff was being done because it was taking the work, the way it was being worked was the same. So you were having, accounts being done manually. You were having membership being, done by post and by check, for example. And so all these processes were, a lot of effort was being put into them. And so the basic stuff for the BDA was, a lot of effort, but people weren't seeing it because it was taking too long and too much effort just to run the BDA, the motor running, let alone think of all the great stuff of doing, like maybe marketing the sport better, or helping clubs to recruit better, or improving, the coaching, or the safeguarding, or the O1 guidelines, and things like that. So we are getting there. I mean, if you want, I can reel off a few things that the BDA, I feel the BDA has done in the last year that probably paddlers aren't aware of.
Well, Yes, hold that thought, because most definitely, certainly, because it is an opportunity amongst many others to communicate with people. That's what this is all about, first and foremost. And this is not I mean, it may sound like it if somebody heard a snapshot, but it's not it's actually
Uh-oh.
not a criticism. It's a reflection of human nature to a certain extent, to close ranks, and people end up with a situation. We've never done it that way before. We've never done it like that before. We've always done it like this, and that's just natural old thinking. Of course it is. It's human nature. It's not specific to the BDA or any other dragon. It's just a collection of people who've been the guardians of a sport, and as they progress, not always, sometimes become a bit reluctant to change. And I've been on the BDA executive, so I know exactly what you're talking about. So yes, and that's true. But but just tell us, give us a snapshot, because I don't think personally, this is a personal view, I don't think the communication is as good as it can be, because I am aware, and this is my point. I'm not saying you're not doing anything. What I'm saying is I know what you're doing, because I've spoken to people, but I've had to ask the question. It's not readily available to people how relevant the organisation is. Now, yes, it has a racing focus. It's a British Dragon Boat Racing Association, and that's a very small part of dragon boating. That's one thing. Okay, that's a decision, maybe. And all the documents, in fact, I spend a lot of time on the website because I'm going through some stuff regarding another issue anyway. And the focus of all the policy documents are pretty much towards racing, obviously. But give us a illuminate, shine a light on the sort of things that the BDA executive are doing on behalf of the members, please.
I completely agree with you about the communication. It is not very easy, and it's not, the BDA is not BDA is its own worst enemy. We do a lot of stuff, but we're not very good at A, promoting it, and B, the tools that we use to promote are not that great either. Yeah. So there's a number of people on the exec that have been working on this. We've got a lot of, let me go through some things. So this we have, when I joined, I really wanted us to improve the feedback from clubs, and I really wanted us to improve the communication. I would say so far, and it's not just me, it's others on the exec too. I don't want to make it look like this is,
I thought it was all about you. No,
amazing thing. Yeah, it's all about me. But we have been very slowly but steadily getting towards a better place for that sort of thing. So, when I first joined, we had the BDA Congress, and we have BDA AGM, we have Facebook, we have Cruise Act, I guess, and we potentially have everyone's email address when they register with the BDA. However, going through those tools, the BDA Congress, I mean, the last one was quite well attended actually, but the first one I attended had about 30 people. When you think there's 1,200 people in the BDA individual members, and then 2,000 people maybe in BDA registered clubs, that's quite a reasonably poor turnout, let's say, and not all clubs were there. The BDA AGM is probably even worse. So those two mechanisms really were the main mechanisms for communicating back to the BDA. What we've done is we've improved our social media. I wouldn't say it's perfect yet. We've doubled our number of Facebook followers, for example, in the last 3 years. So it's about 1,500 now, I think. We set up the BDA Club Forum, where we've now got over half the BDA clubs, a representative on the BDA clubs in this forum. We had our first ever Zoom call about a month ago, where we discussed everyone's favorite topic, the coronavirus, and how we could support clubs, what clubs were doing, and what thing could the BDA do in the future to maybe even start 2021 with a bang, if we're allowed to. You never know what's going to happen at this moment in time. We've made the exec meeting minutes published on the website, so it's now exec meetings are hopefully more transparent if you want to read through 3 or 4 pages of meeting minutes. We have improved the amount of posts we put out on Facebook, and I think the biggest thing, and if you were at the BDA AGM, which was also on Zoom and probably the most well attended it's been for a billion years, or certainly in my paddling lifetime. We had, I think, about 70 members on the BDA AGM, which is, considering we're talking about signing off financial accounts and things like that, is quite impressive. If you're on there, you'd have heard Chris Bailey, who's one of the other executive members, talking about the BDA digital platform, which, in my opinion, is a game changer for the BDA. It will improve it will merge things like the membership database, which is quite, for want of a better word, inaccurate at the moment. It will merge it with the coaching database, the DBS check database. It'll allow us to communicate so much better with members because they'll have their details in the system. They'll be the ones that are able to edit them. So we'll be able to email them and tell them what the BDA are doing or point them towards things. We'll be able to make sure that we know, that member A has coaching award B, or has also got a DBS check and is part of Thames Dragon Boat Club, or Typhoon Dragon Boat Club, or whoever. Will potentially, this is the basics. This is what I've been talking about earlier. The basics of the BDA should be easier to control. We'll have hopefully more data on paddlers and know that actually we do have a problem because we've got, this is not the case, but let's say we only have 4 women in the BDA, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we do need to start looking at how do we improve the amount of women, or the amount of young paddlers or old paddlers, or whoever. So once we're able to have a more transparent view of the membership, we'll hopefully be able to start targeting areas that we are concerned about, for example. Yeah. Other things that we've done, we've moved to online banking. We've moved to an online accounting system. Yeah. We've moved to a new insurer, which has also come with it a nice insurance microsite where you're able to go on and see properly up-to-date information about what your insurance is, and even contact the insurer directly, very simply through the portal. And if you're a club, you can even add extra insurance onto your system through that insurer as well. So, there's a number of things that, we with the help with Barbara, we published a new safeguarding policy. Yeah. Chris Bailey published a new rules of racing document, and that's all been in the last year. One last thing, we've refreshed the club development fund, made it more accessible. It's on the website. You can see what the criteria is. The criteria document hopefully is very clear, and very soon we'll be publishing details of some of the clubs that have actually accessed that in the last few months, and what they accessed it for. So you can see the types of examples that clubs are using some of the BDA money to, what they're putting it towards. So hopefully,
I'm actually quite keen on getting Chris Bailey on this discussion here to talk about some of those in some detail. But I'll get some details off you later on, because there's another Chris Bailey, but that Chris Bailey is from Bournemouth Dragons. But anyway, oh
my goodness, there's more than one Tim Smith. There's more than one Chris Bailey. This is getting complicated.
That's a case point because I gather, I think you may have told me, you may have not. I can't remember. Somebody told me that because of some mix-up in the coaching scheme, that I was divested of my coaching qualifications and they were given to you. I mean, congratulations.
I was, for a period of time, a coach level 4. So
well done.
I was very happy, and I managed to sign off millions of people on their coaching awards in your name. I hope that's okay.
Absolutely. I mean, an easy mistake to make. But it's just getting things just up to date, and I think an outside organisation would look at it and say, well, that's preposterous, but of course, whatever. But that takes a bit of time.
Oh, absolutely. This is what the membership platform, I mean, to be honest, Chris Bailey has really put her heart and soul into that. And I've sort of helped her along the way. But if you saw the amount of emails to and forth between our third party from Chris, and the amount of detail she's going into. We've also got a group of testers from various different clubs at the moment who are even finding other things that me and Chris didn't find, which is brilliant. And I think collaboration and getting other people involved in those sort of things is really helpful, and something I would say the BDA has traditionally not been very good at either. And I think getting people even small amounts of effort in can sort of maybe break down barriers and show them that maybe they can get onto the exec. Maybe they can get involved in the BDA more, whereas perhaps in the past they thought it was a bit more of a closed shop. I don't know.
Oh, I mean, the areas that I'm specifically interested in, yes, I'd say that's probably, I'd agree with that, concur with that. Quite, yeah, definitely. Okay. Obviously, COVID-19. I'm actually trying to host a little conversation on Saturday with anybody who's interested on how we're going to actually get some ideas about how you're going to manage the return to getting into dragon boats. Now that's
Yes.
I'll leave that for Saturday, because I'm not looking to drive any policy. I'm just interested in how people are interpreting things and what they think the guidelines mean, and just get some ideas. That's all that is. It's just out there for what it's worth. But how has the organisation, bearing in mind it's primarily focused on racing, and we're not doing a huge amount of racing at the moment, or maybe for
Hopefully not.
how is the relevance I was talking about? How is the BDA staying not relevant or current or communicating with people in relation to that, and that sort of thing, really? So how is that that working?
I have to say, and I'm obviously slightly biased because I'm on the exec, but one of the things I have been impressed with the BDA, especially the BDA executive, is how kind of quickly they've responded to events, how transparent I think we've been. We set up the coronavirus web page subsection, and the job of the governing body of the sport, and then you mentioned racing, but really our vision is we should be there to support clubs as well, and provide sort of like not I don't think we should be providing mandatory rules. I think we should be trying to provide guidelines that help club committees to implement their own policy. And obviously there are areas where we have to be strict because we're talking about people's lives in certain areas, but we should be there to provide guidelines. And I think we've got the right balance from my own personal view. We've looked at the club training. We basically stated what we think should be happening. You shouldn't be doing club training right now. We've added some bits on the O1 training as the sort of lockdown has, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if it's quite a lockdown, but whatever you want to call it, has started to ease a bit. And we've added our views there after talking with the insurers, for example, and talking with various other third parties. So we came up with some guidelines. I know you've had some thoughts on that. And we have been talking to the clubs in the BDA Club Forum about what they've been doing, and what their views are, and trying to come up with things that that they feel we need to do. That I feel up to now, we published on Facebook, Cruise Out, and then we've got the web page. I feel that we have done slightly more than, I think more than the bare minimum, put it that way. I mean, there's obviously millions of other things we could do. I mean, you look at British Canoeing or some of the other governing bodies that are much, much bigger and more well-resourced than the BDA, and they have been providing some more bits and pieces like online coaching, things like that. I think I would have liked the BDA to do, but we're exec of 8 volunteers. I think it's 8. Maybe I'll probably just drop myself in it. Maybe it's 10. And we don't. Some of us are also club committee members. Some of us have jobs elsewhere, lives elsewhere, family members elsewhere, etc. So it is tough. And we could definitely provide more, but I think we've done a fair amount of work on helping clubs through it. But you've got to remember, dragon boating is a group sport and is on the water, both two things that have literally shut down. So I think out of all the sports I've seen, we are probably in the eye of the storm in terms of coronavirus impact. And also because we're amateur sorry, that's probably a wrong word, but we're not paid sportsmen. You look at the Premier League, for example, they went back to training this week, Tuesday, I think it was. You look at some of the things that the clubs there have put in place, testing when you go in, testing when you go out, temperature checking, only 5 people allowed in the training ground, I think it is, and all of them have to socially distance by 2 meters. Liquid hand sanitizers everywhere, washing of equipment. For Thames, put it this way, that's a lot of money that we will have to spend to get training up and running, in my view. And so I just think our sport is very difficult to get going. O1ing is an exception, but again, for Thames, our dock is closed. So whatever O1 advice is out there, even if they said we could be a trapeze artist team and go out with 400 in a boat, we can't because the water's shut. So,
okay. So, but which links back to Thames specifically, because obviously lots of clubs are providing lots of stuff, organisations such as mine, small organisations, we offer all sorts of different things. People, it's there for people to use if they want to use it. If they want to use it, it's fine. We'll just
I
carry on.
attended your Indian club session, and that was brilliant. I really enjoyed it.
But that's there for whatever. But how are Thames as a snapshot specifically? So Thames Dragon Boat Club, how are they keeping contact with people? You touched upon some things before we started. Just give us a bit of insight into that, if you would.
Yeah, sure. So I absolutely love Thames. I think I've really enjoyed being. I love this. One of the reasons I like this sport is because it's a social sport, effectively. And you have rivalries with other teams, but then you get in the same boat with them the next week and things like that. So with Thames, it is a group community sport. We have what we call our coach is Bill Keane. He's a main coach, and we have a banter group called Keen to Banter, which is a great pun, I think. And it's just a various WhatsApp chat that people post all sorts of ridiculous and sometimes important stuff in. That is flash. If you ignore that for a day, you're missing 300 messages. That kind of thing. So people are constantly short chatting in that. We have a broadcast which we've been updating paddlers on, which is another WhatsApp thing that all members sign up for. So the Keen to Banter, you don't have to be in. Some people choose not to be because they're probably fed up with the amount of updates. We also update via email. So that's the sort of kind of communication part of it. We also, some of us have House Party app on our phones. So, various people, we're in London, we've got young people, we've got old people, and some of them are isolating on their own. They can get onto House Party, and most of the time someone will come in and have a chat with them on a video. We've been doing circuit training through coach Linda Barry. She's been brilliant. She's been running Tuesdays and Sunday circuit training using Zoom, 40 minutes. And for me, that has been a godsend, because I don't think I would do any exercise if I hadn't been forced into a schedule. Every Saturday, some of our members, we've got some of our social members have been organising dance-offs, chat-offs, karaoke, things like that on Zoom, and that's been getting 15, 20 members in. We actually had a quiz organised by Kingston Royals. Thames, it was East v West, we called it. Posh versus, I don't know what you want to call it, less posh paddlers, and they won, unfortunately, but it was really well set up on Zoom, and we had a 2-hour quiz on that a few weeks ago. It was brilliant. We've got coming up a Thames internal quiz next week, and then we've got a chat with a purpose as well in the future.
What does that mean? What's a chat with a purpose?
Chat with a purpose is where, because I think it's a trait of Tim Smith's, but we like to talk. So someone like me gets on Zoom and we talk. Some other people don't talk so much or don't want to talk so much. So if you have a chat with a purpose, you have a minute to talk about a subject of your choice. You don't get interrupted. And then people can ask you questions on it. And that way that people like myself don't hog the call. Other people get their chance. So
right, okay, that sounds good. Yeah,
it's quite a nice thing. So we shall be doing that. So there's bits and pieces like that. I mean, we did our social media secretary Ben. He's been doing like St Neots did the toilet roll challenge. We've done a sort of a fake fun fight and a comedy on videos. He's also asked us to post our favourite races, so he's posted that, and some people have posted some races from the 90s and stuff like that. We've got members that go back all 25 years of Thames, for example.
Yes,
so
yeah.
It's been amazing actually for a club, for a sport that has needs water access in groups. We've been incredibly active from what I can see. So.
And I think that's, I know, I mean, Sonia, my wife, is a member of Seclo. They've been doing stuff, they've been doing Seclo.
Oh, yeah.
And I say this stuff, this time of year, I would normally, it's a privilege. I get to travel around and coach in different countries and all that sort of stuff, and that's fantastic. But with the advent of the restrictions, I found myself in a short space of time running, basically, training in 5 countries from my back garden. And I'm running,
you live on YouTube, don't you?
Well, I'll tell you what, 8 to 10, sometimes more sessions per week. And that platform now, I found it by accident. I was doing some coaching in Kinneret, northern Israel, Lake Tiberias, Galilee, a few months ago.
Lovely.
It's great, and it's great. And it just occurred to me that I listen to a lot of podcasts, Rogan, that sort of stuff. Really interesting, long form interviews rather than snapshot clickbait. Take the time to listen to what somebody's saying. You might get the gist of it. And it occurred to me that I know lots of people in dragon boating. Yes, they're unified because they're dragon boaters, but they've got backstories. It might not just be, they could be from a different interest or whatever. It could be breast cancer, it could be anything. But lots of really interesting people who happen to do dragon boating and have found
Yep.
it for a different. I thought I need to start doing something when I'm interviewing. And actually, this platform, this program is what I did it for. But if you look at the YouTube channel, it's got a whole host of other stuff, which is just
yes,
accidental. And it's amazing, but it's just whether I will carry on doing it, but it's just a fantastic opportunity. And I've found with all due regard to the sad state of affairs regarding people dying of COVID related illnesses and all the other secondary victims that go along with it, this actually has provided a huge opportunity, not to monetize it, because I've monetized none of it. It's not a case of that. It's actually staying connected with people. And Bournemouth Dragons is a good example. Even though I coached them, I'm not their director of coaching. They gave me the title, but I really help them out when I can. And last year, I got very few opportunities to get down there. And now I'm down there every week. But I'm not actually, but you see what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm running 2 sessions in Cyprus a week. And I'm doing this. And we're trying to do a pink, it's called the Friday Fandango. It's a pink paddlers. I do something with pink champagne. And I'm trying to get 100 paddlers from across the world on Friday night at 6 o'clock, just to come along, have a chat. I'll make a little video out of it, run a quick session, but that's just joining people up. And I'm talking to people in New Zealand and America and stuff, and thinking, well, I wouldn't have found the time to do that.
I think for example, I mentioned earlier, Neil Pickles has been pushing the Zoom onto the BDA exec, which has really helped in terms of exec meetings. We don't have to meet up face to face. But I think, as you said, the COVID-19, the pandemic has been, very negative on a lot of aspects. But as with everything, you can always take some positives out of things. And every cloud has a silver lining. Yeah. I'm not saying the positives outweigh the negatives, but there have been some positives. I think for me, the BDA AGM, for example, we had the biggest turnout I've ever seen for an AGM. For Thames, we've been doing circuit training. I mean, the numbers have slowly dropped down, but the first Zoom meeting that we did on circuits, we had more than we turn out for actual circuits in a little training room at the dock. So I think, and in my personal life, a few weeks ago, I had a Friday night drink, a virtual drink with some old uni mates, and some of those uni mates I hadn't seen for 5 years. Well, we've got another meet up next month, so twice in a year, and it's, you're starting to see certain things, as you just said, where maybe not all the time, and I don't want Zoom to replace everything, or not Zoom, but any online video conferencing.
There are others available, you have to say.
Zoom has definitely been the one that's, I think it's probably this year in the Oxford English Dictionary, to Zoom will be a verb or whatever. But I think a lot of people have started to see the power of not necessarily always needing to be in the same place, in the same room as people. I just hope it doesn't replace everything, and I don't think it will. But as you said, you can train people all over the place from the luxury of your sunny back garden. So in
coaching, I do like referring to a number of quotes, and I'm not sure where this one comes from, but basically every adversity carries the seeds of an equivalent advantage.
Yeah.
I think it was an American statesman, but that's, and necessity is the mother of invention. And that's really, you don't wish it upon somebody in the same way that you wouldn't wish breast cancer upon anybody. But having found yourself in a situation where you're diagnosed and go through treatment, then I'm not saying you make the most of it, but why not? But then there's plenty of advantages once you've got yourself in there. And nobody would say, that I've ever heard, or would say, I'm glad I got cancer. Clearly they wouldn't. They would prefer not to have cancer. But they do recognise that because of that huge adversity and that huge challenge they faced, it has opened up some advantages, and they're happier people for it. And
Yeah,
it's an
you can take
interesting.
positives from things, and as I said earlier, you can't always outweigh the negatives with the positives,
Yeah.
but there are always things that happen that
Which
like as during the pandemic, as you found, as other people have found, there are some positives. I've discovered loads of even in Deptford, where I live in London, many more local businesses, including a German bakery that I had no idea about, and it's just on my doorstep. And they do an amazing Sacca torta, which is the Vienna
yeah.
chocolate cake. And I've fallen in love with it. I think
Well,
I'm going to be fat, never get in the boat again because I'm going to be eating too much of it. But things like that, a nice additional positives in what has been a pretty rough time.
yeah. Well, I mean, where I live in Stony Stratford, which is like a village. I mean, Milton Keynes is getting bigger and bigger, and we'll eventually engulf it. But it's an old coaching town, a lot of history. Goes back to sort of, I mean, it was not founded by, but it goes back to sort of the 1200s, etc., etc. And I've been, myself and Sonia, have been rediscovering our local area. Even if it's just going for a walk, talking to people. I mean, Sonia's had a bike in the shed for years. Now she's on it most days. I mean, silly things like that. But
Yep.
there's equivalent advantage, and unfortunately, we're not very built up here, so the
Yep.
restrictions haven't been too restrictive. And I appreciate that's not the same across the board in different
Absolutely.
parts. Certainly, some parts of London I've worked in as a police
Yeah,
officer,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
etc., etc. But it is great that you take the time, you found the time or made the time where normally I'd be rushing around, I'd be planning to go abroad,
Mm.
go here, go there, and forgetting where I live. So there's some advantage there. But that brings me on to my last point, and it's really the capacity of this sport to change lives.
Mm.
I mean, so I have this conversation, fortunately, and I am fortunate, around the world with different people, and this common theme comes up. It doesn't have to be racing. What's your no thoughts on that? But how has that? How changes have you seen? Whether you've been doing the sport 5 minutes or 5 years or 50 years?
I
Tell us something
well,
about.
well, to start with, massively biased because I absolutely love this sport. I before I joined, I mean, I ran, I played squash in the past, done tennis, but not anywhere close to a level you would say is even mediocre, let alone good. So I would never have considered myself a sportsman. I certainly wouldn't have considered myself joining a sports team where sometimes I'm training 5-6 times a week, maybe even 7 if it's a particularly exciting week.
Yeah,
The capacity for this sport is it's how, in my opinion, is how open it is. It's an amazing sport because let's take nationals. Thames went to nationals last year. Front of the boat in the drumming seat, we had a 10-year-old. Back of the boat, we had over 60-year-old helming.
did you say a
And
rower?
sorry, no, I was didn't want to say the age. So
Oh,
over
over. I thought you
60-year-old.
said a rower. Then what?
No. Oh gosh, no. We wouldn't. We're open for everyone apart from
Yes,
rowers.
yes.
um, yeah, we had a over 60 helming the boat, and in the boat there were women, men, people from Malaysia, people from uh, uh, Philippines, people from Thailand, people from Finland, people from Czech Republic, people from England,
Yeah,
even I think Canadians, which so um, even Canadians. So we have a massively diverse sport, and I think that makes the sport, in terms of meeting new cultures, meeting new people, having it's not even traveling very far from my house to East London. I can have experiences that I would normally have to pay thousands of pounds to travel around the world to do.
yeah.
And as you say, as I've said, I'm LGBT. My partner, Kevin, is in fact I should say, well, I don't know what the term is now because it's all been cancelled, right? But he is or was in the GB Senior A. Went to Germany a couple of years ago. Never
He
have ever
certainly
thought I
is
would.
in GB Senior
He's a
A. I
G,
can
he's a
assure you
GB
that is
Senior A.
definitely the
There we go.
case.
I don't know I don't know what the status of it all is now, but yeah, he's in that. And to give a 40-plus-year-old Malaysian British person the ability to get in and compete for the country. The possibilities are so
Yeah,
vast in this sport, and that's what I like about it. And it's such a social sport. You need 22 people in a boat, and if you've got a big team, you can have 2 boats out and all that sort of stuff. You've basically got to get on and paddle in unison with potentially men, women, young, old, any ethnicity, any background. And I think that gives you a nice, broad, open mind and helps your well-being, basically. And getting out in the morning on the all in the same boat, and that phrase has never been more relevant for dragon boating.
Yeah. Okay.
And you're out on the water. Behind me, Venice, amazing. You get to paddle in so many amazing locations, including in front of a sugar factory in an airport in East London, sometimes with Thames.
That's spectacular.
And Henley, going up all the way up to Stockton and paddling down the river with Powerhouse. I remember that was beautiful. You get the peace of mind of seeing the river and then getting shouted at for not being in time, for example, is amazing. That's why this sport is so fantastic.
Okay.
And anyone can join it.
Last question for me. This is not a loaded. This is the only loaded question I'm asking.
Yeah, I love loaded questions.
Are you an athlete?
Technically, yes, because I'm part of Thames and I paddled a few times a week. For training, I go to races. I go to national races. I enter national competitions. So I think anyone who does that can be classed as an athlete.
I'll tell you why I asked the question. I started coaching in the US a few years back, and over there, whatever level of sport you do, you're an athlete. You're the dictionary definition, a person who participates in sport. And if you go onto the continent, it's the same. It's an athlete. But the British connotation, we tend to sort of think about athletes as being Olympic athletes.
Elite
athletes. Say we're amateur sports people, or we're sports people, or whatever. And I changed, having worked in America, I changed my viewpoint. And now to my squads, I would say you're an athlete. And if you don't think you're an athlete, what are you doing here?
Yeah, well, exactly. I think it's the Britishness that it's the same as if someone says, "How are you? How are you doing?" You don't say, "I'm amazing." You say, "Yeah, doing all right." It's the same thing.
That's understated. If you go to America, they would say they're amazing.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, but I wouldn't say I don't feel like an athlete, but you're right. Technically, I am an athlete, and I think everyone in the sport is an athlete. But whether you're doing it once a year or once a week or once a day or once an hour, but I just don't feel it.
but my point there was, the last point really, because we're on about 50 minutes now, which is absolutely fantastic. And that's we talk about the capacity for this particular sport to change lives, but we tend to understate the capacity to change people's frames of reality. I don't use the term stain point or trying to think of the word. What I'm getting at is I'm talking about frames of reference and standpoints and mind frames rather than mindsets. So I've got to say, in the last 10 or so years, a lot of the things I used to think, my perceptions about sport, having been a competitive sports person for a long time, have changed completely as a result of experiences I've seen, different people, in this case in boats, doing different things. So it's not just I've changed my life because I was a breast cancer survivor. It's fundamentally important, though that is. It's just other stuff where you just have a look at something fresh and new and change. That's great. And it is great. It's a fantastic sport. And
I agree. It's the best sport I've been involved in. It's the most open sport I've been involved in. You can, we've got people in the club who have joined when they're over 60. There's very few sports you can say where you can join in, you can take part in national competitions. And just to add, Thames did reasonably well at the nationals last year. So you can even do reasonably well in national competitions and still, and not have to start when you're 5 years old. And go to elite schools or whatever to do it, which is brilliant.
So open and inclusive, brilliant. Okay, I'll tell you what, 50 minutes, absolutely fantastic. Mr. Tim Smith, the younger, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. It's been absolutely brilliant. Any final words from you?
Thanks. No, thanks, Tim Smith. I think the other Tim Smith. I always have to put when I email people, Tim Smith, the other one.
Yeah. No, the younger. You're not the other one.
I don't know if I like the younger.
I'll
be 40 next year.
You're the main man. I'm the other one. I'm happy to be the other one.
No, thank you very much for this. I think the more we get dragon boating on in different areas, the more we can grow the sport, the more we can promote it. It's a fantastic sport, and I love it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Cheers, mate.
Yeah.
everybody. Paddle Shanties number 3. I'm very pleased and very proud to welcome Mr. Mike Haslam. If you're not already aware, Mike Haslam was the founder and long-time president of the IDBF, celebrating 30 years next year. Also involved with the EDBF, celebrating 30 years this year, and a founder and honorary president, long-time president of the British Dragon Boat Association as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that'll do it.
That'll do it. A long line of accolades. I was actually going to talk to you today about the coaching scheme. Obviously, I'm very interested in that side of things and how that develops. And then I happened to chance upon Dragon Sport News. Well, I knew it was there anyway. Firstly, I read an article you wrote a few months ago, and that was about the history of dragon boating. And I rarely read something and actually laugh out loud. What I laughed about, I mean, it's fantastic. What I actually laughed out loud was in there, you were talking about your early relationship with, I think it was the British Canoeing Union, and the fact you sent some stuff in and they politely ignored you. And that's what made me laugh, because that's sort of my relationship with the BDA, where they politely ignored me. But anyway, that was that. That was very interesting. But then recently, yesterday or the day before, you posted something talking about the who is the IDBF governing bodies. And it made me laugh, to my particular sense of humour. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. Let's have a look at that. And the article starts with some stats and stuff on who the proportional balance, and it's very similar to the UN, different countries in terms of a central council, etc., etc. And the last part was really interesting because it talked about the balance side of things. So how do you think, before I ask any questions specifically about that, how do you think the IDBF should be balanced? Because obviously there's a small number of people with the key positions.
Yeah, it's easy and difficult in the same breath. I mean, when we set it up, Bob Wilson drafted the statutes based on the Rowing Federation.
Yeah.
And I wrote the bylaws and the rules and regulations, competition regulations, based on my background in canoeing and obviously on the Hong Kong races. So that's how we started. So we started with the traditional setup of an international federation.
Yeah.
But because we were new, we wanted to make sure that there was a balance in the council, because the council, if you like, is the management policy making body. Okay. Yeah. So we had, I think, 4 vice presidents, maybe less than that at the time. And we tried to balance the vice presidents so that there was 2 from Europe, maybe 2 from Asia, 1 from North America, something like that, to get a balance. Yeah. We also tried to balance the commissions in the same way. There's only 4 then. So that we had a spread on the council of different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, different views, different ideas. And that was how we set it up initially. And the executive committee was the management group of the council. And so the president, secretary, treasurer could be from anywhere. We needed the right people to run those positions. What's happened over the years is, of course, as sports developed, got bigger. Yes. Certain countries, more advanced, have taken a bigger slice, if you like, of that development, and therefore ended up more. I think the Big 5, as I call them.
Yes.
Which, if you look at the council now, by and large, most of the Big 5 countries are represented there in the executive committee and the commissions particularly. And when you look at those Big 5, they're all, with the exception of China, Western based.
Yes. So just for the benefit of the viewers and listeners, we're talking the Big 5 you've cited there are Australia, China, US, GB, and Canada. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not a criticism. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's a matter of fact that you've got. You're talking about Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and the US, almost the English-speaking group that,
yes.
that in the old days, days of empire and all the rest of it, we're all together and are still together in terms of, if you like, family connections. So you have a commonality of background and thinking in that group.
Yeah.
So that's one side of the field. Is that good? I don't know. Is it or isn't it? You know, in a voluntary sport like ours, you get the people that want to put themselves forward, you're not paying them, so you don't necessarily get the best brains out there, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's the system. On the other side and coronavirus has really brought it to the front. It's the system that we use now, not just in sport but across society. How's that been affected by coronavirus, and how has the development of IT affected the way we communicate and work?
Yes.
If you put the two together with coronavirus, you can see we're talking on Zoom now, having a meeting, and people all around the world can tune in, could give their opinions, what have you. So we have a different background to society now, and will have coming out of coronavirus. So my question, therefore, is thinking forward. The old guard, myself and Mike Thomas and Alan Van Kalberg and the other people that have brought the sport from its beginning, not dragon boating, but the modern sport of dragon boat racing, from its beginning now over this 30 years. How are we going to take, not us, but the next generation, how are they going to take that on the next 30 years, given IT and the way society is operating? It seems to me that maybe the model we have at the moment, or the, if you like, traditional model, is not going to serve the sport the best. It's not serving the sport the best. Because
and I think you say in the article, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, I think you say something along the lines of the system has not fundamentally changed since 1991. And it poses the question that how should it respond to a new membership? I think there's something like 74 members of the IDBF, and we've got the representation. And when I read it, it reminded me of the UN. Having probably you with the British Army, certainly me with the police, have worked on various missions abroad, and you've got a different big five there who are actually ruling the roost, and to a certain extent dictating. I think there's something you mentioned there about I can't remember which one else. There's some coronavirus maybe where the big five had not dictated it, had directed the vote, and then the 74 members contributed to the vote, but they didn't actually contribute to what they were voting on. So that reminded me of the UN and national balance, where in the UN, I'm sure you know, I did a mission in Jordan, training the Iraqi police, I don't know, 2005, 2006. And I was involved in the driving school. I was a detective. It was bizarre. But we had to put an individual from a certain country in charge of the driving school, not because he or she was any good at it, but because they were from a nation that hadn't been represented. So that was like fairness, rather than saying, actually, well, look, we've got 2 Brits or 2 Austrians or 2 Hungarians, and they actually happen to run a driving school in Budapest or wherever. So it was that sort of thing. And I wondered if that was not what you're getting at, but that was in your mind when you wrote it.
Well, to that depth, just merely the fact that, there's 27 members on the IDBF Council, and there's only about 9 countries represented on that council across the board, and of that, and 5 of them have the biggest say, if you like, in what the IDBF does in its policy. Whereas with IT, like now Zoom, the council could be any number, or to me, whether you need that structure at all is the question, or whether you just need a very small secretariat, for want of a better word, and then people can feed in their ideas through Zoom meetings, as we do in the EDBF and the BDA and the IDBF. We have Zoom meetings now once a month, and we can talk things through. It doesn't replace the actual face-to-face meetings. I still think you need those in between. At the BDA, we have a monthly Zoom meeting, but about every 3 or 4 months, we actually meet physically. Because, there are things that you can't easily discuss on Zoom. And there are things sometimes where you do actually need to have that interaction. So my question is really simply, is the system of governance that we use at the moment suitable for post-corona situation, given the modern IT and the way it's developing now? It gets faster and faster, doesn't it? Next week we'll be able to look at our watch and have a Zoom meeting without doing any of this, or whatever. It's almost.
I agree. I wonder if it's just. I mean, the fact that we've got a pandemic or whatever ongoing at the moment has just really brought the the elephant in the room into sharp focus, and just another anecdotal thing, which I mean, don't comment on. It's just I had a I mean, it doesn't matter. I was setting up a little scheme. I've got lots of schemes going on about getting people involved in some things just to keep people connected. Okay, so this is all it was. And I wrote to some people from a governing body and said, would you like to get involved? And I got some polite messages back saying, we're not endorsing this. And I felt like writing back to saying, well, to be quite honest with you, I wasn't writing to you as the president of this. I was actually writing to you as a human being. Would you like to have a look and come and help us out? Now, my point is not that. That's fine. That's for the individual. But I just fear, really, that when you get too high up the food chain, there's always the risk of losing touch or losing sight of what you're actually there for. And I know these are racing organisations. I get all that. And I think
you're absolutely right there. I mean, I've always gone from the point of view that I'm a paddler, whatever position I hold, and I want to hear from other paddlers. You know, my email has always been there, open, and now Zoom and all the rest of it. If people want to contact me directly. You know, I'm not the president of the IDBF. I might. I'm a paddler, the same as you. Let's discuss what's on your mind. You know, and if you don't like the policies that they were putting forward, why not? Let's discuss it. Maybe we've got it wrong. Maybe you've got it wrong. Maybe you don't understand. Maybe we don't understand. But to me, communication, particularly in a voluntary sport like ours, is the most vital thing. If you lose that, then you know where do you go? An example where it first really struck me was at the Southeast Asian Games some years ago in Macau. Yeah. Now Macau's the size of a postage stamp, isn't it? And I was obviously the IDBF president because it was the Southeast Asian Games, and there's only about, I don't know, 8 or 9 sports involved in the Southeast Asian Games, Dragon Boat being one of them. So because I was invited to Macau, which I went to every year anyway. So and normally you turn up at the ferry point and there'd be a car or a minibus to take you to your hotel. All right. I arrived at the Southeast Asian Games, and there's this huge top of the range BMW, big black BMW, whatever. And I'm looking around, and this guy comes to me and he says, "Oh, you know, the president Haslam, Dragon Boat. So this is your card. We'll take you to the hotel." So okay. So I thought, okay, it's about 3 minutes, if that, to the biggest hotel in Macau. Okay, in this nice BMW, I get checked in. I find myself in a suite. I'm not kidding you, a suite. Okay, which, you know, I'm only there for 3 days. I don't need a suite. I just need a bathroom. So, okay, it's late. I go to bed. Come down the next morning because I want to go around to the regatta course, which again is, you know, I could have walked it in 5 minutes. Yeah. And there's a line. There's these people outside. I start chatting, and they're all presidents of the other federation. And there's a line of 8 of these BMWs, okay, in a line. And I think, oh, what are all these for? Oh, well, it's one for each of you. Wow. Okay. And I thought, this is getting bad. So I looked around, and on the corner was a group of paddlers, dragon boat paddlers. So I walked over them and said, "Hi guys, what are you up to?" They said, "Oh, we're going for training." So I said, "Why are you standing here?" They said, "Well, the minibus hasn't turned up." There's only 4 of them. Yeah. I said, "I'm going there. Jump in the car." Okay. So we walked in, the driver looked at me, he said, "Who are they?" I said, "They're coming with me." So they started to get in the car. There's 2 or 3 of the other presidents still there, and they said, what's this all about? So I said, what all about? They said, "Well, you know, these athletes getting in your car." So I said, "Well, they're my paddlers. They're going to the same place as I'm going, taking them." They said, "We would never, ever do that." Yeah. And these are Olympic sports. We would never, ever. And to me, that really sent the message home. Once you lose contact with your paddlers, your athletes, the people actually that are important in the sport, then you've lost the plot, in my view. Luckily, I think by and large within the IDBF, we're still very much paddler based in the council. But you know, 1 or 2 signs along the way with how people react, you've mentioned. Which, you know, can be slightly worrying, but I think on balance we're still okay. It's keeping that balance and making things better going forward that I'm talking.
No, what?
Sorry, I'm rattling on.
No. There's, I've got, just for balance for anybody listening. I'm not suggesting whatever scheme I may have been suggesting a completely harebrained, ridiculous scheme. That wasn't my point. My point was that the default to I'm the president of whatever I'm the president of, and we don't that sort of thing. So that's all it was. But if somebody like me suggests something totally stupid, then I'll be surprised if they didn't slap me down and say get back in your box. So that's fine, no problem with that at all. And I expect that if I stick my head above the parapet, occasionally it's going to get shot off. I spent 30 years in the police doing that, and that's fine. I'm cool with that. Something else mentioned in that article, which I thought was really interesting, and in fact, let me just cover this first. It reminded me of when you were talking there. I used to be in the police. I was a detective for a long time, and we'd have case conference. So we have major inquiry. It might be an attempted murder or something, or some serious crime, and we'd be sitting down and we'd be talking about what we should be doing. And I found myself frequently saying, "Why don't we ask the victim what they think? Right? Why don't we ask them? So instead of us sort of shooting the shit, basically, and sort of saying this, that, and the other, why don't we ask the people who it actually impacts on?" Of course, what you're saying there with Zoom, I mean, if you asked a question of 74 representatives of 74 IDBF members, probably 70% wouldn't respond. But the point is, you've given them the opportunity to respond, and then they respond if they want, and if they haven't got time or inclination, then big deal. And that's what I thought about there. But the other thing is the issue of ladies on the executive. And let me just put this in context. I was interviewed for a job, which I got actually in Cyprus a few years ago, to run the National Squad. And when I went to the interview board, I flew in, went straight to it. And it was a time when the Me Too movement was going, and still going, and quite right. And there's, and I was asked a question, and it was a ridiculous question. I was asked a question about women in sport and whether they needed a representative. And I said, well, to be honest with you, in my view, and I coach women's teams and men's teams and all the rest of it, mixed teams, you don't necessarily have to be a woman to have an understanding of views or issues that impact women. In the vast majority of cases, that is the most appropriate way forward. But it doesn't have to be. And it reminded me in the police that in the 60s, 70s, just before I joined, if a child was brought in, a WPC, a female constable, would look after them, when in fact, most of the ladies in the police were single, and a lot of the blokes were fathers and were far better suited and far better able and skilled in looking after the kids. So it just interested me. In that case, they were basically trying to trap me out into a silly question in an interview. But I was interested, why do you think that the executive, this is the IDBF executive or any executive, there should be a balance with women? And I'm not trying to trap you here. I'm just interested in what's more important, the fact they are female or what skill set they, whatever gender, bring.
Yeah, I think that is the more important question, is whether is their capability.
Yeah.
And I've always said that, let the cream settle where it should be.
Yeah.
And by and large, that tends to happen, particularly in our sport, because we have a large percentage of women. And when we set it up, when I wrote the rules, it was I brought in mixed racing.
Yes.
And all the rest of it. We had this initially, well, you've got to have so many women, blah, blah, blah. Because in China, of course, traditionally, Hong Kong, a woman in a dragon boat was a taboo. Bad luck and all the rest of it. And the first team that we sent there in '87, Elmbridge Canoe Club, actually, that won it, had women in the boat in the Serpentine race, but they weren't allowed to go with the team to Hong Kong because they won the prize. Because I think apart from a drummer, or not even that, they didn't allow women in the boat. And I had all sorts of, not arguments, shall we say, but discussions with people in Hong Kong. The fishermen, of course, were the ones traditionally didn't want to do it. So they take the head off and put another head on, call it a phoenix boat.
Absolutely.
So we introduced mixed racing. They were very upset by it, but eventually, about 6 or 7 years after that, One of the Hong Kong fishermen wrote and said they were dead against it, but now they see how wise it was and what a good thing it was. So, there are times, if you like, when you need to push forward the women's cause, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
But I think that once you've done that, it finds its own level.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that forever and a day you've got to have 50-50 in a committee. The executive, by and large, has always been out of balance in that sense.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's important. To me, the more interesting fact was that overall there's eight women out of the 15 or 16 voted members or whatever it was in the exec and the commission. So from that point of view, dragon boat racing is probably in front of the curve.
Yeah.
The IOC, their proportion of women is different, but they're there on merit, in my view, in our organisation, or they're there because they're capable. Sometimes they might be there because there's nobody else that wants to do it. That's the same with the men.
Yes.
We get a lot of people in international sport at national level as well who are there because they're the only ones available. Doesn't mean that they're not good.
Yeah.
But they're the only ones available. So that might never change. So I don't have a view that says you have to have X number of, or about gender balance in that sense. Let it find its own level. Otherwise, we'd be pushing for 50% male nurses, wouldn't we? Or 50% male primary school teachers.
Yes,
it gets.
I think so long as I think for what it's worth, I think that's entirely right, because even from my experience in different things, then so long as the various interest groups, be that a women's sport, be that transgender issues, be that para athletes, whatever, as long as there is adequate representation, and very often somebody from that particular subset will be most skilled, knowledgeable and interested, and that's fine. But it doesn't always, not 100% of the time, but exactly that. But as long as they're represented where they need to be represented, everybody, then I don't think you go far wrong. But of course, there's always this perception of committees being run by middle-aged or older white European men. Of course, that does put the youth off, obviously, because I think, well, why would my son's 21? Why would he collect a bunch of his mates to come along and train with an old 58-year-old when in fact they can do it themselves? No, that's fine. You've got to look at it both ways, haven't you? Am I appealing to youth? Maybe not. More appealing to my own age group, I suppose. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a natural thing in society, isn't it? The older people have usually got the time and the money to be able to indulge themselves in running things a bit more. Otherwise, the Parliament will be full of under 20-year-olds or under 30-year-olds, wouldn't it? And it isn't. But no, I think we're okay. In some ways, I'm glad to see the IOC has finally caught up with the IDBF, and that they've been pushing over this last few years for mixed competitions in Olympic sports. Yeah. And that's forced canoeing, for example, to bring in women in canoeing as opposed to kayaking, and so on and so forth. So we're doing okay, I think. It's just as always, keeping that balance and not going off on a tangent or forgetting that you're there because people have elected you to do a job for them. They're not there for you. It's the other way around. They're not there to maintain your position. You're there to serve them. They elected you, so do it.
I think we had a conversation. It was last year, sometimes maybe the year before. I don't know where we were. It might have been here, might have been Cyprus. And you mentioned about no specific governing body, but the governing body being the servants of the paddlers in this case, rather than the opposite. And this whole idea behind this YouTube channel is because I do stuff in America now. It's by the paddlers, for the paddlers. No. Of the paddlers, by the paddlers, for the paddlers. And I thought, actually, that's from the American Constitution, but that's really where I'm going with this. Yeah. It's being inclusive. It's not setting up something in opposition to anybody. It's opening up and working with anybody who wants to work and talk and discuss and share, and then fine, whatever.
It's the other one's the Kennedy statement. It's not what your country can do for you. What can you do for your country?
Yeah.
It's the same as
Yeah, that should be.
Everyone else can do for you what you can do for them. Okay. Your other point about, you know, if you have a Zoom meeting, 74 members and only 30 or even 20 turn up, that's good. Because if, as you say, they're given the opportunity to express their opinions and make their play.
Yeah.
If they don't take that, then, you know, same with Congress. You know, we've got 74 members. I think in Thailand about 26 were there. You know, so you get what you vote for in that sense.
Yeah.
You can't complain afterwards and say, well, I didn't vote for that, or I don't like that person, or whatever. I don't agree with what they're doing. Well, if you don't, get there to the next Congress and change it.
Yeah, but then, like I say, I mean, if your argument is, well, I couldn't make to Thailand, but all you got to do is get to a computer screen. That's what you got to do.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot easier. You don't have to go to Thailand.
So that it made me, probably because the way my mind works. It just, when I read it and your article, it's a very interesting article actually. It reminded me of saying, well, yeah, the governing council has decided that the question we're going to ask is A and B, and I'll be thinking, well, I wanted to ask question C, but I get a chance. But yeah, well, like I say, if you want to get involved, fine. Okay.
The next Congress,
Yeah.
which is in Hong Kong, I think the Congress will obviously take place, hopefully, but there should also be screens up, and people that are not there should be able to join by Zoom.
Yeah.
And take part in discussion, or at least listen to what's coming and be able to vote. You know, that's what I'm talking about when you open your mind to what we can do these days in communication through the internet. Yeah. Why are we sticking with the old format completely? Let's open our minds and use this technology.
And what was quite fun, before we just move on to coaching, if we might, I just reminded me to, I have no sponsors or anything as yet, but I must point out that when we talk about Zoom, I know we use that, there are other online platforms available. But I think Zoom is fast becoming, a bit like Hoover, isn't it? It's fast becoming and this is a Zoom meeting, whether it's on another platform, it'll become, I think they've really cornered that with a nice, catchy title. Anyway, just moving off again. The National Coaches Accreditation Scheme. So that, as I understand, that's something you wrote. So the root of that is in the British scheme. So can you give us a bit of history behind how that's come about?
Yeah, I'll try and shorten the story. Obviously, I came from canoeing. My background as a canoeing coach, or kayaking rather than canoeing, in sprint racing. And when I set up the BDA, and went to China for the first, to Hong Kong for the first time, and saw what was happening there. And Mike Elmbury went with me. It was obvious that that we needed to set up some sort of coaching scheme, and obviously it was only the BDA in existence at that time. So I called a meeting in London. Dave Bangs was there. I think probably Mike Thomas, Roger. We did 4 or 5 of us to sit down and decide. Okay, what is it we need? Well, obviously the first thing is a question of safety. Yeah. You've suddenly got 22 people with a big wooden boat, as we only had wooden boats at that time. And at the World Championships in 1981, when I first raced them, and it'll be in my book, this bit, I got the whole of the ICF board into the wooden boat going down Holmcliffe Point, and it immediately swamped, and there they were floundering around in their suits and all the rest of it. I still have that on video. I should dig it out somewhere. So it's not a canoe, is it? And it's not a kayak. It's 22 people in a big boat. So that was the first issue. So we went from that. Okay, what do we need to do? We need to establish qualifications that take care of the safety aspect of it. And the one thing that controls the boat is the helm. So we started from the point of view of what qualifications do we need, do we think, to make the helm safety conscious and capable and all the rest of it. So we started. So the original intention was not to produce a high-level coaching scheme, but to develop from the base a coaching system that would take us through to the next stage of development. So that was why it's a very basic educational training sort of scheme to start with, which covered basic safety requirements, the buddy system, basic paddle stroke, getting in and out the boat, roll of the helm, etc., etc. And that's where we started. And then Dave Bangs took that on as one of our more experienced coaches from canoeing coming into dragon boating, obviously running Amazon, and it developed from there. And obviously Dave took it through to model with the British system of coaching of level 1, 2 and 3. And so we took it forward. Because when the EDBF came along and the IDBF came along, I'm sitting there saying, well, you know, maybe we should be introducing that basic system to new countries coming in, because they won't necessarily have a clue. A lot of information in China, of course, and from canoeing in terms of performance coaching, but we didn't have that in our coaching scheme.
Yes.
Our coaching scheme was introductory and participation rather than performance, because as you know, big difference between the two.
Yeah.
So that's how it went. So I adapted on our days, mainly Dave Bangs' work, and talked to him about it, and we adjusted it so it would work for a new country coming in. Because within the BDF now, as you know, it's modular. So you can take it in bits and pieces. And then you end up with your qualification grade 1, 2 or 3, whatever. But of course, if you've got a new country, you want to start coaches off, people that maybe not been in canoeing or rowing or any other sport, but want to get in. Then you have to have a simple system that gives them the basics to enable them to take a novice crew on the water in safety, and you need to produce that in a weekend. Yeah. Or maybe a little bit longer. Weekend, maybe an evening session as well. So that's the basis of the IDBF and the EDBF coaching scheme, which still remains the same today.
Yes.
People from EDBF, IDBF, myself, Mike Thomas, Alan Pass, have gone to new countries, run that course, given the qualification, then said, okay, that's it. Here's what we suggest for the performance levels, 3 and 4. We're just giving you 1 and 2 in detail. Here's the outline for 3 and 4. Go develop it yourself, because each country is different.
Yeah.
Coaches, performance level have different ideas and all the rest of it, about technique and so on and so forth. So as a national body, or an international body, we didn't feel at that point in time that we could go any further. Now I believe, because we've got so much experience, like you and Pat Bradley and Geordie and Dave Bangs, people around the world, who are now dragon boat performance coaches.
Yes.
They know the physiology, they know the techniques, they know about what the weights and balances and psychology, all the rest of it that you need at performance level. And so I think the question to me, and I was starting to work on it, as you know, when I retired from the president of the IDBF, is whether the time was now right for the IDBF, in consultation with people like yourself and these coaches, to develop the level 3 and the level 4, particularly international qualifications. So like football, you end up with a FIFA referee. In dragon boating, you'd end up with an IDBF coach. With the qualification that people recognise and accept, not just within the sport, more importantly, I think, at performance level outside the sport, particularly if you're heading towards Olympic recognition and all the rest of it. And I had many talks with different people, particularly in China, because finally coaches in China started to engage, because we all know how very different the coaching paddling style is. Started to get information from China, even contacted by a couple of universities that were interested in running summer schools, if you like, for international level coaches to come to get a qualification. But of course, it doesn't exist at the moment. So, as you and I have had discussions with Pat and with other people, I felt the time was probably right to look at them having, I don't like to use the word commission, because maybe that's not the right format for the group of coaches, but the same sort of idea within the IDBF, where there's a group of experienced coaches who could sit down as a group and say, well, these are the things that we think a person that wants to be our standard should have, be capable of doing, should have to take in terms of a qualification and produce a level. To me, that needs a group of international coaches to do it. Can't come the other way. The IDBF can't suddenly say, oh, this is it. because, you know, people are people. And if you want a good coaching scheme, you get it from the coaches, not from the bureaucrat.
Well,
so
I think you're right, because otherwise you end up with a situation where the smaller number, the nucleus of people, end up dictating to the rest. And in fact, we've had this with Pat and Conrad and different coaches around the world, when we come together and do various stuff. We've sort of had these anecdotal conversations. And if you sat down a coach from China, Hong Kong, the US, Canada, there will be certain things that are fundamental. Now, I've got to say, safety is not as fundamental in the US as it is over here, for example. So you'd end up with maybe a course which was 5 or 6 essential criteria, common criteria, and maybe a list of another 6. So, for example, as you know, in Cyprus, they do in the summer a lot of paddling on the sea. So navigation safety and sea safety might be a module they do, whereas if you've got a landlocked country in Europe, they may focus on something else. So you end up with a common system which has common components and a pick and play side of things as well. And I think that work has not been done, but it's recognised. If you get over the idea that coaches tend to be a little bit parochial and concerned about, but that's by the by, that's the individual.
Yeah, of course. You're right. There's enough information out there in different countries to pull it together, look at it, pull it apart, and put back together something, as you say, that has common sections across it, which will give people that are using those coaches some sort of guarantee that they're getting a good service.
Yeah,
it's all about. And I think that's probably where we are now. I mean, you know, the Canadians in particular, of course, with their huge history of war canoes, have always had a boat which is similar in lots of ways to the dragon boat, and therefore the paddling style it could be similar. A lot more experience than Europe, where it's the old C1 with the J stroke and all the rest of it. You know, Canada was different and is different. So there must be a wealth of experience and ideas coming into dragon boating from Canada, and same with Australia or the States, and from Europe. So you put that all together, pull it apart, and you come up with, I think, with a good system that has credibility, and that to me is the key. It has to have credibility.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting there? It's interesting for two things, because your original National Coaches Accreditation is still actually on the IDBF website, so somebody could have a look at that. You either use it off the shelf or use it as a template to develop. And I appreciate, and this is fair enough, and I've got no view of what I have, but it's irrelevant on the link between effective coaching and water safety. I would say that's intrinsic from my point of view. So you'd have to have a comprehensive coaching scheme. But that aside, at the moment, the governing body is not so focused on performance coaching, and it's up to a governing body to decide their own roles, responsibilities and priorities. Fine. But that being the case, so it's not being driven at any level by the IDBF as I understand it. What do you think is the right here, right now, a good way to progress that? So would we just get together as a bunch of coaches and come up and do a study, or what do you think?
Well, I think there's two approaches. One is, yes, to get together as a bunch of coaches and discuss it by Zoom, because it's easy these days. And then I think you have to. This is where we get into the formality, if you like. It would need someone or some group. Say you've got a group of Canadians, Brits, Australians, for example, in your coach forum. For coaches in those particular countries, then to go to their own federation and say, look, this is what I've been discussing. Isn't it a good idea for you to get the IDBF to set up some sort of working group to look at it? Because at the moment, coaching broadly comes under the Competition and Technical Commission, but it doesn't have a voice there.
Yeah.
It tends to wax and wane depending on who's asking for a service and who's available to do it. So it's very difficult. But I think it's got to be a two-way approach.
Yes.
It's going to be an IDBF qualification. Then obviously IDBF has to be involved somewhere down the line, not told, hey, this is what it is. but hey, we'd like to develop it. Will you help us, if that's the right word? And let's have some formal group agree. I mean, I was looking at putting forward a working group of coaches to come back with ideas, and I think, you know, that's the way to do it if it's coming from the IDBF angle. I mean, Mike Thomas is a coach himself. I mean, he's, you know, always very keen on coaching. Been around with me running these courses for years.
Yeah.
As the president, and you know, and as soon as I was able to, if you like, move away from that, leave it to other people, I did so, because it's not part of the president's role. But you know, the interest is still there, and I think Mike still has that interest. He's got a lot of other things on his plate. I'm sure that setting up a working group of coaches would be a good step. So, you know, maybe needs to come from both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would work in a UK type society, maybe the US. But I'm always conscious of the fact that if you're trying to get broad appeal across the 74 nations and beyond, then if I just turned up, I'm just going to pick Mauritius out off the top. I don't know anything about Mauritius. I do know I've got a mate who's out there who set up the Mauritius Paddling Academy. Used to be one of my GB blokes. And say, for example, and I'm just hypothesising here, lots of societies, and Mauritius may or may not be one, that say, well, we'll contribute to that if it has legitimacy by the governing body. So in the UK, pretty much anybody can set up whatever they want, and away they go, and then recommend, and it can get adopted or rejected. But I think in a lot of societies, unless it has some sort of official buy-in, that top cover, if you like, to initiate it. So it actually is an IDBF or an EDBF or a BDA study or whatever it's going to be, then I think it will have more scope. It can have a set of legs rather than being potentially dead in the water. That's just my... And that was my point originally, to say, well, we're not asking for anybody to do any work. We'll do the work. We just need the endorsement, not to adopt what we say, but just to sort of give us some legitimacy to go to these various countries that are more not...
Well, yeah. Absolutely. Of course, that is the other restricting factor in a sport like ours, which is, say, all voluntary, is money. If Olympic sport, you have your couple of $1 million flooding into each year because we happen to be Olympic sport, then it's easy. You develop a scheme and you say to Mauritius and Pakistan and all these other countries that come in, okay, we're going to send our coaching team to you, and we're going to run the basic courses for you to qualify your people as coaches and race officials, so that you can start to develop the sport in the right way. And they'll, you know, tell us when you're available, and we'll send the team out. No cost to you, no cost to the people that are on the course. We want to get the sport started. We want to get it developed. When you've got money, things like that become easy. When you haven't got money, like that, you run into the difficulties you're talking about. How do you get the legitimacy for the people that go in there? And where are they getting their funding from to go there? At the moment, if we go and run a course or officials or coaching in Iran, for example, or whatever, they had to pay us. They had to pay for the airfare. We didn't ask for any money for doing it, but we asked them to cover our accommodation airfares, and we would turn up. Well, again, you know, how many new countries, developing countries, can even afford to pay for one or two airfares from someone from Europe or Canada or Australia? You know, but you know, that's the other big equation in international sport at the non-Olympic level, is where do you get the funds for to be able to do all these wonderful things that you want to do? That's the big question. I
mean, one other thing it reminds me, I mean, in the mid 2000s, I was in the police, and I was also doing some stuff with the International Red Cross, and I found myself in Namibia training the police and law enforcement in human rights and humanitarian principles. I was in a place called Umaruru, which is in the middle of nowhere in Namibia. I was training the police, I think, on that occasion, and I was the only European in town, and I was the only European. I bet I was the only white bloke. I think they've actually some people actually seen ever, and their attitude was basically, what can you tell us here in Namibia with all our various problems? What do you think you can tell us about policing, human rights, humanitarian principles? And it's a huge coaching challenge. It's a different subject, but to a certain extent, with the top cover of, in that case, the fact that I came from London, so they thought I came from Scotland Yard, which I did sort of, and the fact I was from the International Red Cross, that gave me that legitimacy. It's up to me to put the point across, but in that sort of society, then without that top cover and that legitimacy and credibility, if you like, you know, I can mess it up by talking crap for 2 weeks, but assuming I didn't, then without that, I'm not going to get my foot in the door to start with. And that was my point. You know, I can go and coach in Ireland maybe and US and all the rest of it, and that's great. But take me to India and Pakistan and some more, the newer members, and there's going to be that issue if it's not a endorsed.
Yeah,
that's all. Yeah,
you need to be going as an IDBF level 4 international all singing, all dancing coach.
Yeah,
because that's what people respond to. You know, of course, we always put the IDBF or the EDBF logo on in conjunction with, you know, this is blah blah blah. Oh, that's wonderful. If you took that logo away, then they say, well, you know, is it worth it?
You wouldn't get your foot in the door. Exactly that, and that's all it is. It's just a door opener, and then what you do once you're in the door, obviously, is yeah, different. Yeah, interesting. Okay, I hope that will because the way I see it, I mean, personal view, I mean, there's such an intrinsic link between quality coaching at all levels, not just basic level, advanced level, of course, but boat safety as well. And you know, it's just such a just getting people out on the water, whether you're talking about corporate, recreational in America, international racing. I know it's a racing organisation, but yeah, yeah.
You covered 2 different points, or we were covering 2 different points there. So just another ramped up the story on funding. I was at a sports council meeting some years ago, and obviously the BDA rep. Towards the end of the year, and you know the system, around about March, I think it was, February, March, and they were saying that they got, as they always did, have extra money at the end of the year they wanted to spend on their pet projects, and they wanted to give £30,000 to each of their Olympic committees, Olympic sports, to fund some statistical investigation or something, 30 grand. And the rowers and other people turning it down. They said, oh, you know, £30,000 to employ someone else, you know, it's not worth our while. And I'm sitting there thinking, give me £30,000 and I can run the sport for you.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was on the one side, money solves everything. On the other side, what we were talking about, lost my train of thought now. On the other side, we were talking about what we were talking about. Coaching and going to places, weren't we?
Coaching, link between that and safety, development, the wider picture.
A bad story, sad story. You know, we had one death in the UK.
Yeah.
With not sound accommodate training on the National Water Support Centre.
Wayne Smith, yeah.
In a training situation where Wayne Smith didn't, the boat swamped. They all swam to the shore. They didn't use the buddy system. Wayne, being the assistant coach for the boat, said, "Okay, you go. I'm okay. You know, I'll make sure that you're all off the water." So that the crew went to the shore, and it's only something like 50 meters from the bank.
Yeah.
Turned on, no Wayne Smith. Anyway, he drowned and all the rest of it. So at the inquest, of course, they asked the question: well, whose rules were they operating under? Who's the governing body? BDA. Okay. Well, where's the BDA rules to do with training situation, blah blah blah, and safety and so on and so forth? Which we had, of course, luckily, because the inquest in the UK and I'm sure other countries, they proportion blame.
Yes.
It's the centre against the individual, against the club, against the governing body, whatever. And I'm sitting there answering these questions, and you question yourself, and you think, well, could we, you know, should we have had more regulation? Should our coaching scheme have been more comprehensive? You ask yourself all sorts of questions, because these people don't know your sport, and they're asking the sort of questions that anyone would ask. Well, who's responsible? Who's the top organisation that's laying down all these rules and regulations. So it struck home with me then that you have to have this system that's legitimised and is seen to be right. I have the same discussion with the French, funnily enough, because the French, when they started and still do, have to their coaches have to operate under the Canoe Federation's
Yes.
rule, because that's the water sports federation that the French government recognises for all sorts of habits. Okay, the French don't have a coaching scheme or any safety policies or anything. So if anything happened in France, they would go not to the Dragon Boat Association, they would go to the Canoe Federation and say, well, okay, where's your coaching scheme? Where's your safety regulations for dragon boating?
Yeah.
Where's your qualification for dragon boating? They haven't got any. So, you know, the question there is you have to be careful. Litigation, particularly in the States or Canada and the UK now, is a serious business. And it worries me on an international scale that in that sense, we have got to do more to protect our members. And the only way you can protect them in terms of what we're talking about, coaching and so on, is to have a scheme, recognise the people that are qualified to deliver it. And then when the question comes up at the inquest in France, oh, but where's your regulation? They say, well, we don't operate under the regulations. We're a dragon boat organisation. This is our international federations, and these are the qualifications. International federations are a member of GOEFS, and GOEFS is part of the IOC family. So there is the line of responsibility.
Well, let me share another experience with you, which is really completely relevant. I have the benefit of working in different countries, and I was working in a country that will remain nameless, and they didn't have the same stringent safety culture, not by a long chalk, that we fortunately have in the UK. I'm not saying everything's perfect about the UK, but this is good, our water safety policy and everything that flows from that. And it was down to the organisers were concerned. They didn't want to cover things like capsize and all the rest of it. I teach capsize prevention, not capsize. Fundamental difference there. The same things, but it's a different emphasis. But they were very reluctant and nervous about me teaching anything to do with safety, because if it all went wrong, there would be liability, and that was okay. But after having persuaded them to show, do a few sort of exercises and demonstrations, the majority of the paddlers came up to me after and said, we're really glad you did that, because you took us out and you showed us stuff, and I've been paddling 10 years, I never know how to do all this sort of stuff. And you think, that's an example of a governing body in that case not listening to the paddlers, not recognising that the bottom line is these people want to go out in a boat, have a good time, get shown a few things, come back. It's like Brian Hanrahan. You want to count them all out and count them all back. And that's really important to people, whatever nation they're from. So irrespective of that's it's like the same thing I was talking about earlier. If in doubt, ask the paddlers. They'll tell you exactly what their priorities are.
Yeah, absolutely. Another philosophy, if you like, whatever you want to call it, I've always gone by in coaching is and you myself as my own model, going into canoeing all those years back and starting to take coaching qualifications and all the rest of it. Hang on, just get rid of that. Is I remember, I think my first white water trip down a river that we went on, and being told how easy it was to do the ferry glide and how to cut in and out of
out of a current, all stuff,
go across rapids and things, and how difficult that was because you've never done it before. And then fast forward a few years, and I'm doing the same thing because I'm better now. And now I'm a coach, and I'm saying, "Oh, do this, that, and the other." And I'm looking at people, like looking at their faces, and I'm looking back at myself 10 years before. So I always say to coaches, never forget how you felt the first time someone asked you to do something that you hadn't done before. How difficult it was for you, how easy it was for them, and how you said, "How can I possibly ever do that?"
Yes.
So you have to take people along with you. As you know, all good coaches relies on that relationship between you and the athlete or coaching.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, forget it. You've got nothing.
Yeah.
So it's the same again, isn't it? Communication. You have to come down to
Yeah.
what the individual is thinking and wanting, not what at that stage what you think.
Yeah, because it's strange, isn't it? It's about them learning. It's not about me telling myself what I already know. Well, that's sometimes missed as well. But yeah, that's a whole other subject. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. We've come up on 53 minutes. I'm gonna. That's been absolutely fantastic, right? That's enlightening, interesting, entertaining, and exactly what I'm doing this little podcast sort of thing for. So, Mike, thank you very much for your time. Hang on there for a minute. What I will say is we mentioned a couple of articles there which go out on Dragon Sport News, and at the end of this I'll have a credit screen. We'll tell you how to get access to that. A lot of information on that site and the Facebook as well. If you're interested, Mike contributes to that. I think a few others as well. So do fill your boots regarding there. But Mikey, thank you very much. I'll stop the recording now, but hang on there for a minute. Thank you.